Welcome to Write Now Workshop Podcast, where you can write a book and change the world. I'm your host, Kitty Bucholtz, and this is episode 198, Everyday People with Big Hearts, an interview with Kristan Higgins, coming to you on Thursday, May 21st, 2020. I'm very excited because I've just interviewed a really big name author, somebody that I've admired for ages, a long time, for my 200th episode. And oh my gosh, does it seem like 200 episodes to you? Because it doesn't. But 200 episodes coming up in 2 weeks. However, today I feel like there should be a big star next to episode 198 too, because this is another big author that I've admired for years. And I have to say, a few days after this interview, I took a Sunday afternoon and decided, you know what? John should just play his PlayStation. We don't have to worry about Netflix and what can we both do together that we both like, because I'm going to sit down and read the entire rest of this book. And I was only maybe a third of the way through. Oh, when was the last time? I don't know, maybe you're luckier than me in the reading department, but when was the last time I, at least, got to just sit down for 5 or 6 hours and read an entire 400-page book? And not just that, it was so good. And there was some laughing and giggling, and there was a lot of crying at the end. And then, it was just happy. It was just happiness. So if you haven't read a Kristan Higgins book, I suggest you give it a try. At least read some book descriptions on whatever is your favorite place that you like to buy books, and see whether or not this is the kind of book that interests you. I love it. They make me laugh a little bit. They make me cry a little bit. They just make me happy. So Kristan Higgins is going to tell you all about how she does this. And the reason why I chose the title is because I think it describes all of her books. Everyday people with big hearts. That's probably why I love them so much. So since it was a long interview, I did not want to stop talking to her. I want to have a short introduction. We'll get right to it. Here's Kristan. Today's guest is Kristan Higgins. Kristan is the New York Times, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and Publishers Weekly best-selling author of 19 novels. They've been translated into more than 24 languages and sold millions of copies worldwide. Her books have received dozens of awards and accolades, including starred reviews from Kirkus, the New York Journal of Books, Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, People, and Booklist. Her books regularly appear on the lists for best novels of the year. Kristan is also the co-host of the Crappy Friends podcast, which discusses the often complex dynamics of female friendships with her friend and fellow writer, Joss Day. The proud descendant of a butcher and a laundress, Kristan lives in Connecticut with her heroic firefighter husband. They own several badly behaved pets and are often visited by their entertaining and long-lashed children. Welcome, Kristan.
Thank you. You did a great job.
Thank you. I didn't trip over it nearly as much as when I was practicing.
It's a mouthful. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to have you. I mean, partially just because you're already an author that I've met at conferences and read your books. And also, it's just fun talking to people from the other side of the world who are, still having a very similar life to on this side of the world.
Yes. Yeah. I'm in my pajamas and drinking coffee all day long. Time is meaningless. I don't know what day of the week it is,
Exactly.
So not that different really from my regular life.
Right. I've talked to so many writers that I'm like, so is it just me, or is your life as normal as it ever was? They're like, yeah, just that there's other people in the house now.
Right. Well, I have the luxury of being able to be alone. Although my 21-year-old son did move back home reluctantly. He's working, he loves school. And so if I need to get away, I come up to our little family place on Cape Cod, which is where I am now.
Oh, nice. Okay. So many of your books, or I don't know, all of them are set in Cape Cod, right?
They're set in the Northeast. Quite a few are, I can't remember, but a few in Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, and also upstate New York. So nice. I'm a Yankee, and I think too, there's a very distinct sensibility about our region of the country, and that's where I grew up and what I know. if I were to write a book set in Texas, everyone would know it was fake. I
Right.
don't, there's just such a, like, there's a voice, there's a way of talking. So I kind of stuck with what I knew.
Yeah. Even though I've been gone since 1993, like you, like I was born and raised in the same area, everything about my life was shaped from, just a few miles apart until I was 25.
Mhm.
So all of my books are set in some version of that area of the
Yeah.
world. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And
like you
it's
said,
beautiful. Michigan is beautiful. The Northeast is gorgeous. And you really do, as an author, you want to give your reader that sense of setting, so that if they are from Texas and they're reading a book set in Vermont or something, they'll say, like, it was like a vacation there, And
yeah.
I've had readers say, like, I'm going to go to the Finger Lakes region of New York because of your books. Um, and it's really satisfying to know that, like, you created a setting, or I don't know, expounded on a setting in such a way that people felt like they've been there or want to go there.
Yeah. Yeah, I had somebody email me once and say, I just went to 3 of the restaurants that Sydney went to in Little Miss Lovesick in Traverse City, Michigan. I'm like, aw,
Yeah. You've done good, right?
right. Okay, I have to ask you though. So we were talking about characters and you've mentioned your children, so many
Mm-hmm.
people do in their bio, but I'm wondering, this whole needing to let everybody know the long lashed children, is this because you are jealous or proud of their long eyelashes?
Their father has long lashes, and that was actually the first thing I noticed when we were standing in line together, and he turned around and looked at me, and I was just like, oh my God, those eyelashes. um, and they got their daddy's genes, but people remark on them constantly. Like, we can't go anywhere without people saying, like, oh my God, your eyelashes, your son's eyelashes. Or
Wow.
my daughter enhances them a little bit with mascara, but my son is like, he rolls his eyes at, like, all the women love my eyelashes. I'm like, embrace it, sweetheart, embrace it.
Yeah. Because someday you'll meet a girl who you like, and she's going to be like, wow, I'm totally enthralled by your eyelashes. And you'll be
Yeah.
like, I know, right? Oh, okay. So let's start at the beginning. I love starting at the beginning. I like hearing people's, we're writers. Of course, we like hearing people's stories. But so tell us your story. How did you, when did you first start writing? How did you get into it? And when did you realize this was really going to be your thing?
I got into writing fiction in my mid-30s. And I had always loved to read, I think most authors have that in common. And but I never thought about writing a novel because it seems very daunting. And yet I was a stay-at-home mom in a rural town in Connecticut. Our house is 700 feet off the road. We don't have neighbors, which is lovely, but it was kind of a lonely time. And I found myself telling myself stories. My husband was working 2 jobs, as most firefighters do, and and I had these little kids who, God bless them, went to bed at like 6:45 and slept for 12 hours.
Wow.
And also were like champion nappers. And I thought,
Now everyone else is jealous, by the way.
well, that was one thing my aunties all told me. It's like, they make them take naps. It will save your sanity. And they were right. Thank you, aunties. But I thought, like, I really love staying home with the kids. I used to work in advertising. I've read thousands and thousands of books, and I bet I could write one. I bet I could write a romance novel because that's what I had read the most of. And, it is, for me, I love to read a book where it's like very clearly structured, and I found myself like becoming a student of the books, not just a reader. And I thought, I bet I could do this. I see what happens here, And so my first book that I ever attempted to write, I'm married to an Irishman, and I'm interested in Irish history. And I thought, I'll write like this Protestant Catholic drama romance set just after the potato famine, because how romantic is that, right?
Right. People
And
dying, leaving their
yeah.
homeland.
So I had like a heroine who was the oldest of 1,000 children, and Um, like they were very poor, and then the Protestant Duke comes home, and it was such a horrible, depressing mess. Like it was laughably bad. I call it the Poe fam romance. They've got Regency, chick lit, friends to lovers, and potato famine romance. So I wrote, I may have finished that book, or I got well into it, and I thought, even I don't want to read this. It's so depressing, and it, I just loved the angstiness of it all. And then I thought, none of this history is maybe accurate, and it's hard to do all this research. I went to, it was funny. The internet was new. It was like Google was new. I went to Google and I typed in writers conference near me. And there was one like the next weekend in New England.
Oh my goodness.
So I went, it was the New England Romance Writers Conference. And I thought, I'll go and pitch my potato famine romance and meet some published authors. And, I'll be in the club. There'll be a bidding war for my book. And
of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So I went to the conference, and it was such a welcome feeling to meet people who understand what you're talking about, to find out that there are terms and words like character arc and critique partner and partial, and you start to learn the language. I didn't know anything about publishing. And I thought I remember I was looking around and listening to people talk about their books. And it seemed to me that everybody was writing very extraordinary worlds of vampires and shapeshifters, or Navy SEALs turned bodyguard to the president's daughter, and billionaires and opera singers and football players. And I thought, where are the books about us? Myself, these women, my sister, my friends, where's the regular person romance? And I thought, that's what I should write. I should write a romantic comedy set in a small town.
Yeah.
I live in a small town. I grew up in that same town, and write what you know.
Yeah.
So I started the night of that conference writing what would become my first completed manuscript, and that became my first published book, Fool's Rush In.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding? This is your first one? Okay, everybody, part of the reason why I was slightly late today was because I was like, I'm just going to read one more chapter during lunch. Oh crap, I forgot to take a shower. I need to do that. Yes, Fool's Rush In. This is your first book? I mean, your first published?
That was, yeah. So,
and I think I picked it up just so that because Michael Haig was on and on about, I'm pretty sure it was this one. Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of my first teachers. And still my best teacher when it comes to shaping a novel. I always refer back to his terms and his way of framing a story, because it really resonated with me. But so I wrote that first book while my son was in nursery school, and kind of as a lark. And then I submitted to an agent. I figured there's this magical creature called agent out there, and she does all the hard work, negotiating contracts and foreign rights and all that. So I was rejected by, I think I got into the 30s. But one of the first agents I submitted to was Maria Carvenis. And when she got back to me, she said, I'd like to see the full. And I gave her a pitch via email. She said, send me 3 chapters. And then she said, I'd love to see the full. And a couple of weeks later, she called me with an offer of representation, which is when shit got real, Yeah. Because I was like, oh my God, I have an agent now, and she's going to sell my book. And she did. And it was a 2-book contract. And I was like, oh, I should write another, shouldn't I? But luckily, as a first-time author, your book doesn't come out for 2 years, so you have time.
Yeah. And your husband, when you were started, how did he feel? And then when it became real, how did he feel?
He was and is just incredibly supportive. When when he got hired as a firefighter, he had his dyslexia and he had trouble like with the written part of tests, and I would help him and help him study, and he said, you helped make my dream come true. Now it's my turn to help you.
Oh,
right?
And that is why you write romance.
Know, right? And so
we love you, Mr. Higgins.
So he was, like no one has been less surprised than him. He's like, because you're great, honey, you deserve this. And he's really thrilled. And he's the kind of husband who, like, I was talking to him yesterday, I didn't get out of my pajamas all day. It was about 6:00, and he said, thank you for all the hard work you're doing. And I'm just like looking like the laziest person on earth, like not even sitting up straight in my chair, and we're FaceTiming. And he's like, thanks for doing the heavy lifting, honey. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, all this work. I know it takes a lot of mental energy. And I was like, so he was completely thrilled. And, but I didn't really think that I would be a writer the way that I look behind in the rearview mirror and I think, isn't it amazing? I've been writing now for 20 years. And my first book came out in 2006. And I have my 20th book comes out in June, Always the Last to Know. Wow. And I think I never foresaw that. And I think when it hit home was when my daughter was in high school, I was offered like a 4-book deal. And I thought, this is going to keep going. Like, I think I might be a writer for a living,
Yeah.
So I think it's not the kind of career where you can plan to be successful and support yourself on your books, It happens to some authors and it doesn't happen to many deserving authors, There's a lot of luck and timing involved. And I had the luck, I had the timing, I had a great publisher who, kept with me while I was the best kept secret, in publishing. Yeah. And they made me a best-selling author, And so there's a lot of pieces to being an author. You have to do the work, you have to show up, and, being decent, I think, is a big part of your relationship with your readers and your publisher and everything. But it's still such a happy shock to think like, oh, I'm an author, and I see the book cover and I'll see like my name really big on it. I'm like, oh, look, that's me.
I remember the first time I saw something of mine in print, and on the one hand, in the big scheme of things, it was a small thing. It was I had one devotional and a devotional book, and it was the first thing I'd ever gotten published. But this book was in Costco, and I'm standing there surrounded by a crowd of people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, and I picked it up, and I was just like looking for someone to tell.
Right.
I'm like, can I tell a stranger I'm in this book?
Yes, you absolutely can.
So did you just realize that you had found your niche accidentally? Like you just wrote about people
Yeah, and again, I wrote what I termed the every person romance, where the heroes were not Navy SEALs or famous actors. They were the carpenter down the street or the lobsterman. I like that. The idea that we regular folks can have a splendid novel-worthy romance,
Yeah.
And it was, my book came out in 2006. And if you look at the time that our country was going through, we had 2 wars. We were still raw from 9/11. It's a very uncertain time. And I think people really loved finding a little community that they could move into because it's not Beverly Hills or Paris, it's just like your neighborhood, and the safety of the small town community, because communities are a big part of what I write.
Yeah.
And so I think that was part of the reason for my success, was the comfort that people got from the books and the laughter,
Yeah. That's the thing I always think about when I think of your books. It's how much I generally laughed during them. But I love the way that your website says something about books that will make you laugh and cry and laugh again. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's how I feel when I read them. How'd you know?
Well, I love that as a reader. I love like the full emotional journey. I want to be gutted. I want to cry. I want to know this character so deeply that when I read about what happened to her at the prom, or, how her mother always ignored her, something, that I feel it,
Yeah.
And when an author does that for me, it's unforgettable. And I become their devoted fan, promoter,
Yeah.
servant. Like, can I clean your cellar while you write another book real quick, and
Yeah.
I'll make you dinner. Just you do you.
Yeah. And then it won't turn out like Misery, I swear.
I'm your number one fan. But so I try to write what I want to read, So I want people to laugh. I want there to be moments of absurdity. I want there to be gut-wrenching emotion. And then for my reader to trust, I'm going to make it all better, you know?
Yeah.
So that's just, I love that emotional experience. Witty repartee and goofiness is great, but for me, it doesn't sustain a whole novel. And also, I don't want to read Anna Karenina, which is such a downer all the way through, like for me, the great novels are like Wuthering Heights. You believe that Kathy and Heathcliff will get together, and that they're meant together. And when I was 14 and reading it the first time, I was really, really angry that they didn't get together.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so you have kind of your style, your place that you write. And when we were talking about, like what sorts of things should we talk about? And you were saying that character development is one of your favorite writing topics to talk about to people. And I'm thinking, okay, that's perfect, because I want to ask you, when somebody has a little sliver of this genre, this is what they write. But then after, 19 or 20 books, what are some of the things that you do to try to make sure you're not writing another version of that same character from 3 books ago? Yeah.
That's a great question. And it is something that I struggle with, because I like to write the funny, smart, self-deprecating heroine, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make sure that she's not just, this character, cross out her name, put in another name? And for me, I try not to only write the smart, funny, self-deprecating heroine. I also have written like more of the bitchy character, the transformation of the shrew kind of thing. And characters who are very, in Always the Last to Know, I have a main character, Juliet, who is very down to earth, concrete, knows how to get things done. And yet she's having sort of an existential crisis in her life, where she thinks, like, I've done everything I was required to do. Why am I so scared and anxious and nervous about losing everything, So I try not to just regurgitate what has worked in the past. And I look at, I always start with, this will be a book about, and I try to fill in with one word, like forgiveness or recovery, or familial roles, or marriage. This is a book about marriage, when it works, when it doesn't, when it stops working. And then I pick the character. I love the complexity of family dynamics. I'm one of 3. I'm the middle child. My mom has 8 younger brothers and sisters.
Oh, wow.
And I think that one of the things, I'm the oldest granddaughter in dozens of cousins and aunts and uncles. And because I was on the older side, it was always my job to kind of rally the children while the grown-ups talked, but I could eavesdrop, I'd be eavesdropping on the grown-ups, or I'd be like holding the fussy toddler and allowed to stay at the kitchen table because I was providing a service, And I loved listening to them talk about their childhood, things that my mom experienced that, her brothers didn't, or, the way my grandparents went from being 20-year-old parents to being 42-year-old parents, um, and I loved the way that, this aunt would have a completely different perspective of that time of life. And they'd be like, really? I didn't think, Uncle Larry was that bad. And like, no, Uncle Larry was horrible. I just loved the different versions of the same event. And I think that's why I love writing families so much, because of that. So I start with, this is the situation, this is the theme of the book. This is what each character will be wrestling with. And then I look at, why would Sadie be such a free spirit, always less to know, when her sister is such a list maker, color coding and all that, what's their difference in upbringing, and what events can I put to justify and make the reader understand that Barb wasn't the best mother to Sadie, but she's not a horrible person either. Why was she such a good mother to Juliet? Those kind of things. And I spend probably 2 to 3 months developing that kind of thing before I start writing my book.
Wow. Okay.
So that I really know, this character is this way because of these things that happened in her childhood, events, people, setting, and that's why she's going to make sense. She's not going to just be, the sweet, goofy, bumbling heroine who stammers, and I love that heroine, and I've written her, but what else? What else is she?
Yeah.
What strengths does she have?
So like if all of your heroines were gathered on a bench in the mall and the average passerby walked by, they might see 3 or 4 goofy girls and a couple of serious girls and something else. But if they stopped and talked to them, they would see how really different all of them were.
Oh yeah. There'd be the power suit heroine and the effortlessly elegant, grew up with lots of money heroine, and there'd be the skinny little tomboy and the 6 foot tall alpha woman, and I think that's where families come in.
Yeah.
If you have 4 older brothers, you're going to be a different kind of girl.
Yeah.
And if you have 4 older sisters, you're going to be a different kind of girl. If you're an only child, if you're adopted, if you're a twin. So yeah, I like to think that each of my heroines would stand out. A lot of them would be friends.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the things that I am always thinking about. Like, I want to write about people that I want to be friends with, and I want to write about people who are like my friends.
Right.
These are the people that I know really well. I know I could write them,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The most interesting thing that, so I'm pretty sure that God is cool with this, but it is still embarrassing to say out loud. So I go to church and somebody says something that I'm pretty sure that they meant for me to take in this direction, but I'm like, oh, in a book, then that would be like,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So one time we had a pastor who said 3 or 4 times over 10 years, because it always stuck with me, because I was like, oh, this is brilliant writing advice. Also really brilliant how to get along with your siblings advice. But he said, nobody is born into the same family. And then he would pause and let people really think about it. And I was like, yeah, we have 4. And then I'm like, oh, my brother was born to be an only child. And then my sister was born to be the only girl, the little princess or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then this, I'm like, oh, I see what he means. And then I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly like the perfect way to think of your characters,
Right. Yeah.
Because otherwise I tend to have a lot of only child, parents dead characters.
Right. I know. And that's very appealing sometimes. Like, how do I make him a loner? I kill his family,
Yes.
And I think, nobody is born into the same family, and no reader reads the same book. There are expectations and personal things. I wrote a book about developing self-esteem in a body-obsessed society and looks-obsessed society. And so I wrote Good Luck with that, about how do you get confident and like own your power and enjoy yourself without constantly judging your exterior.
Yeah.
Because that's something I think, I mean, certainly every American woman has faced that. And I would go so far as to say, like, unfortunately, every modernized culture, every Western culture, first world nation, we start thinking like, well, if only I was blonde, or, you know, if my eyes were blue. I remember having a boyfriend tell me, you'd be really beautiful if you had blue eyes. And you don't really come back from that. Like,
yeah.
And so when I got the reader response from that, it was like 99% grateful, healthy. People said, like, I felt seen. It was like, you were in my head. I related to Georgia. I'm afraid of becoming like Emerson. I'm pretty much Marley, you know. And then there was that 1% of people who were like, I hated this book. I hated it. It was a horrible book. It was, you know, and, you know, of course, as a writer, you remember the 1%, but you realize, like, going into that book, you know, you bring all your emotions with it. And I think, like, one of the things that I try to do is rip off the Band-Aids till my character is exposed and vulnerable. And that's when we love her the most and we understand her the most. That's when she's got to be the bravest, when all that stuff, all of her coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms and her little shields and her deflections, take all that away and you leave them like raw and twitching in the sunlight. And it can be hard to read, you know? I mean, I like to write about topics that are emotionally fraught: self-esteem, infidelity, you know, death of a loved one, rejection. And in order to really encapsulate that and give the reader the juicy emotional experience they want, you have to make those characters suffer.
Yeah.
I mean, sadism is a big part of being an author.
Exactly. And it's legal.
Mm-hmm.
So that works out.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, because, you know, writers talking to writers, and then, you know, I really am paying attention to you, but I'm still thinking about that thing that you just said. So I wonder if a few years go by so that you can get over the ouch of the you didn't say 1-star review, but that's how I think of them in my head, you know, the painful comments.
There
And then
will always be one, you know.
Right. Yeah. But I'm thinking, okay, so now I'm thinking about that person. Like, why do they hate this so much? And who are they? And how did they grow up? And what are they going through right now? And how could I use that?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I love getting reader feedback, and I interact a lot on social media with my readers, and I answer all the fan mails. Even, I mean, if someone is really, really cruel, then I don't answer them. I had a book early in my career where, so I wrote it in 2008, and President Obama had just been elected, and I thought, who would, I wanted to have sort of like the good angel and the bad angel on the character's shoulder, and I thought, who would a 30-year-old woman in Vermont look up to? And I thought, Michelle Obama. Perfect.
Yeah.
Like, who wouldn't look up to Michelle Obama? I said naively. And so Michelle Obama was like the voice of reason, and Betty Boop was the, you know, always getting her into trouble.
Yeah.
And so I got some hate mail from people who, you know, said, like, stop shoving your politics down my throat. And I thought,
golly.
you know, I just didn't foresee that. I wouldn't change it, but I didn't foresee it. You know, I'd stand by my guns that Michelle Obama, for this character, would be a perfect fit. And also that she, I mean, in my personal life, I think she's one of the most admirable women in the world, you know?
Yeah.
So you get that, like, that crazy mail. And sometimes I would respond to it and say, like, I'm sorry that you felt Michelle Obama was not a suitable role model for this person.
Yeah.
But I also get like some crazy email. In one book, my character's dad had a pet snake, and he has to go to jail, and she's given charge of the snake, which she has mixed feelings about.
Yeah.
But It was very, I always think that pets reflect personality. So of course he was going to have a snake. He is a snake. So one woman wrote to me and she said, I cannot believe you put a snake in this book. Don't you know I'm afraid of snakes? I will never read you again.
No, I actually didn't know that about you.
Not know that, Or one person said, like, I didn't find it relatable that your heroine drove a Prius. I'm just like, okay.
Wow.
Well, I'm not going to change your mind. So, okay.
Yeah. And what's really funny is that even if I was thinking that, like, I'm just wondering, I honestly am not being mean or like have any negative feeling behind this, but I'm genuinely curious. What kind of person sends an email about it? I mean, like of all the things that you have to do during the day, who goes, you know what? I'm going to let Kristan Higgins know that this is unbelievable that this woman drives a Prius.
It ruined it for me. Yeah, I know. That is, one of the difficulties of our life today is that people will say things online that they would never say at a reading or something. Although I was talking to my friends, Robin Carr and Susan Elizabeth Phillips, if I'm allowed to name drop. We were Zooming the other day and we were talking about, those awkward moments or emails. And Robin was at my local indie bookstore on a big book tour a while ago. And so she has this packed house and she's talking and she's great in front of a crowd. And one woman raises her hand. She said, I didn't like it. I didn't like this book. And Robin said, well, thank you for your honesty. Any other? But you think like nobody forced you to sit down and finish the book, lady, or had you come out to tell that to her face. But the internet lets you do that, without even thinking. And it's just, it's part of life. Part of being a public figure,
But I also think that it gives us a lot more things to. So I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like my books are not only entertaining and help people going through a tough time to think about something else, something that's going to turn out well, but there's also a lot of things just to ask yourself, what do I think? What do I feel about this? And when I write something where somebody is being mean, I feel like it's a great opportunity to let the reader ask themselves, oh, I do that. Do I think that that's mean? I mean, obviously character A thinks character B is being mean.
Right.
Maybe I should rethink. I mean, I hope that that's what happens sometimes.
Right.
And I think that social media is definitely one of those things that I just feel like people just need to think about it more.
I definitely agree. I have deleted a lot of tweets where I think, do I need to weigh in on this subject? Will it matter? Sometimes the answer is yes, and on different platforms, you have a different voice maybe. So I'm a little sharper on Twitter and a little sweeter on Facebook. And I don't know what I am on Instagram. Random.
Random is good.
But I say I would never write about a book I didn't like. I would never, that's me,
Yeah.
If I found a book problematic, I would, if I said, wow, this was really racist, I had a problem with that, but in general, I'm not going to finish a racist book, so I'm not a book critic. I'm more of a book praiser.
Yeah.
And there's so many books that I love to read that I try not to waste time on the books that I don't.
Yeah. Well, not to be a name dropper, but Robin Carr is going to be on my show soon too. So.
Oh, she's great. She's
I can't wait.
Friend. Yeah, she's fantastic.
Well, and maybe the two of you can put in a good word for Right Now Workshop podcast with Susan too. I've met her a few times, but
look what I happen to be reading right now.
Sunrise on Half Moon Bay, right?
This is her latest book, and it's about two sisters after the death of their mother. And they're 20 years apart in age. So as we were talking about, nobody has the same family, not even siblings. They're not even in the same generation. They've never lived together until now, So, so it's wonderful, as you would expect from Robin. Yeah, no, she's fantastic, and you'll really enjoy talking to
I
her. Ask her
can't
about
wait.
some of her funny fan mail.
Oh, okay, good. I will. And you must have some too, right? Funny fan mail.
Oh yeah, I mean, I some of my readers have become really good friends. Like where we'll have dinner when I'm in their city,
Aw.
and you know, I've been published for 14 years, so um, so some of these relationships go back, and like I love when people post a picture of my kids who are now adults, and they'll say like, oh my gosh, Declan got so handsome, and oh, I remember when she was just going off to your first day of school pictures where she had the French braids,
Yeah.
and so that's really wonderful. But I get some hilarious mail. Usually people say, I'm going to give you the story of something embarrassing that happened to me, and you can use it in a book. And I often do.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, as you said earlier, like you have to be interested in people to be a writer.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's been hard for me about the pandemic quarantine is that I love people. I love to eavesdrop. I love to make friends. I will always talk to my seatmate on an airplane or the train, um, and some of my books have been born of interactions with strangers. You know, and I miss that. I
Yeah.
miss just chatting people up. Um, and I was taking a walk the other day, and I ran into this little old man, and we talked for 45 minutes because I was like, "Oh, a human!"
Right, right. It's funny when John got this the job offer to move to Sweden, and then we were like, are we going to move to Sweden? Like it just seems even more outside our comfort zone than any of the other places we've moved to. And one of John's big arguments against was, Kitty, everything I've read is that Sweden is not very friendly, and people don't talk to strangers, and people don't make eye contact on the street. And like he'd read a bunch of things, and he's like, seriously, I worry that we'll go someplace and you will be miserable.
How have you found that to be true? I mean,
Totally not true.
yeah, I was gonna
Whoever's
say,
writing these blog posts, yet they don't know how to be friendly to people. So
right.
also, I live in the city, so it's totally different than if I lived in a little town. But
Mm-hmm.
what I found, and I go to a church that's like so international, like at some point I'm going to count how many countries are represented there,
Mm-hmm.
which, let me just tell you, church potluck has taken on a whole new meaning in an international church.
Oh,
Yeah. Nigerian chicken wings, something or others, and
oh,
South Korean something. I don't understand what it is, but it was
yeah.
good. Yeah. But so what I found is that if I try to just like rein it in a little bit, like don't be totally 100% kitty in front of people, and know when the look or the lack of eye contact means, oh my gosh, not another one of you people who won't stop talking. But what I found is there are so many people who are like, we love Americans. You're just so friendly. It's weird.
Right. I know. My daughter did a semester in Denmark, and we went over to visit. And both my husband and I love to travel, and we love to hear about what it's like, where they recommend, what's their favorite part of living in Copenhagen. And we found that like we'd go into a restaurant, and the waiter would come over and he'd say, hello. And we would say, hi, how are you? And they'd be like, I'm really good. Thank you. Wow. How weird that you asked. But there was always this like little unmute. Oh, you must be American.
Yeah.
Um, and didn't mean they weren't friendly. It just like I was in a store one night, and I wanted to buy my son a shirt. And this one of the things that's so cool about Denmark, and I bet Sweden too, is they close stores at 5 o'clock, so you can go home and have a life,
Yeah.
right?
It's weird and cool.
So I'm in the store, and I'm like, Declan, isn't this a cute shirt? Don't you think you would look great in the shirt? And it was like 5 minutes after 5, and my daughter comes over and says, Mommy, they're closed now. And I said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Are you closed? And I looked at my watch, and they're like, oh, well, yes, but you can stay if you want to, buy the shirt. And I was just like, they didn't even say, lady, we're closing.
Yeah.
Um, And I just thought, like, they're so civilized, but it can come across as, maybe different from
Yeah.
going to our mall where, I'll leave with 3 friends from the makeup counter in Sephora.
Right, right, exactly. And yet sometimes you get surprised. So I was in, so it's lockdown. I go to my same community grocery store, my same community, stores that I always go to, and I've been going to them for 2 years, and I'm just being me. So I say to the grocery store clerk as she's checking out buying bananas, how are you? And she didn't really say anything, but there's that, now we have the
Oh, yeah.
plexiglass partition, so it's kind of hard to hear each other. And then she looked up at me and she smiled and she goes, "Oh, how are you today?" And I was like, my gosh, she knows who I am. And I'm like, "Hey, Tina." And
You've
I'm
made
like,
it.
"This is great." Yeah. So honestly, I think that this is my bit of philosophical, thing for the day. I really think that people in general, they have their cultural things and they have their personality things, but people like to be liked, and they like to be like remembered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when I go to Claus Olson's store and, they're like, "Hey, Kitty, hey, Kitty." And my husband's like, "How much time do you spend shopping here?" I'm like, no, it's just that I want to know how to say everybody's name and I can't say it. So then I tell them my name too. And then after a while they just remember. And it's either my annoying nuisance personality or it's my gift to the world. I'm not sure which one.
We're going with gift.
Let's do it. Yeah. Because we can make it into something. Yeah. And yet, the annoying parts too really make good fiction.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I just made a mean coworker based on someone I ran into, and I just thought, thank you for the fodder, and I think another characteristic of being a writer is a long memory. And I remember, zingers or the time that my aunt Kathy burst into tears at the kitchen table because of something so innocuous, but so you go back 40 years and you remember that mean girl from kindergarten who made fun of my shoes, and they resurface, let alone like your old boyfriends.
Right. You know what though? I wrote a book based on what if we hadn't broken up. And I made it just like, it was sweet and funny. And it's actually, I think it's my best book so far. So yeah. So you never know. I mean, it is after all fiction. So
I know.
But okay, so let's look at for listeners who are just enjoying our conversation, let's think about some of the things that we've said and takeaways that we could have that all of us can try to remember. One of the important ones, I think, is what you said about you just don't know how a reader's going to react, and it might not be very nice. So have you learned to have kind of I don't know, I don't want to say shield, but like just knowing I am happy and comfortable with what I wrote, and I know somebody's not going to like it, and that's fine, so that it doesn't hurt as much when it's like out of the blue, like, "Are you kidding me? You hate me because of this?"
Yeah, I have developed a thicker skin, because I think you have to, because if you're worried about hurting feelings uh, by bringing up difficult topics, then you're going to write a very bland book.
Yeah.
And something that I pride myself on, and something that has been mentioned from my very first book on, is an element of emotional honesty. And I think we need that. I think that as authors, if we can't be emotionally honest and talk about, something terrible that happened or something ugly that was said, or being othered, if we can't talk about that, then why are we writing? We want to get people to think. And in one of my books, now that you mention it, I have a very difficult scene where my heroine is assaulted. And it's a terrifying scene to read. And she is really beat up and has to be hospitalized. And it's, you know, it's a difficult scene to read, but this happens to people. And if we don't write about it and we don't move through it with the character and let the character recover from that and be stronger because it happened, and learn from the experience, then what are we doing? We're just wasting time, you know?
Yeah.
So I try not to think about, is this too sad? Is this too hard? Is this too, you know, too honest? Because that's a hallmark of my writing, and I don't want that to change. I try not to shame anyone, but I know that people are shamed, you know, for whatever reason. For, you know, you didn't have any friends in middle school and nobody liked you. You know, one of my characters was too skinny and the kids made fun of her for that. You know, one of my characters was too chubby and the kids made fun of her for that. One was too tall, you know, and I think that if you just try to write nice, you know, I think you have to take a chance.
Yeah.
I mean, you really are putting yourself out there.
Yeah. I think that it's helpful to me when I try to think, like when I have somebody in mind. There's a couple of books that I've had a particular friend of mine, and I'm thinking, I'm going to write this book for Rachel because Rachel laughs at the things that I laugh at.
Mm-hmm.
And Rachel gets, you know, infuriated at the things that infuriate me. And so if I can make this book, you know, resonate with Rachel, then I will have kind of hit the marks that I was trying to hit within myself.
Right.
Somehow focusing on her rather than on me and what I think seemed to help me to take away some of those, ooh, I don't know, should I or shouldn't I kind of arguments.
Right. I mean, I think Stephen King talks about his ideal reader, you know, like he writes his books for his wife, and that's a beautiful love story.
Yeah.
And I think about, you know, I definitely incorporate people I know into my books, you know, this aspect of their personality or that. And my ideal reader is actually my daughter, because she reads more books than I do. She's, you know, she basically came out of the womb with a book. And I think, you know, if this is smart enough and funny enough and honest enough for her, then it's good. If she would be friends with my main characters, if she would understand that moment, then I'm going to run with it, you know?
Nice.
Yeah.
Aw. Now, were you able to tell her that earlier on, or is that some sort of a secret that you saved because you don't want her to hold it over you as the daughter to the mom?
No. I mean, she was too little when I started writing, you know, to read my books. I made her wait till she was 14. And now she reads them all the day that my author copies come. You know, she sits down and then she emerges from the room and she's like, it's wonderful, you know. Yeah, I don't know if I've told her, you know, you're my ideal reader. I don't know that I really thought about it until the question, you know.
Yeah.
But in thinking about it, you know, if it meets her standards, then I feel like I've done my job. My husband, on the other hand, he just, like, every book is a masterpiece. He cries through them, and it's horrible for him to read a book in front of me, because if he laughs, I'm like, what? What's funny?
Right.
What's funny? But where are you in the book? Read me the sentence, you know. And if he cries, because he's a big softy, if he cries, then I'm like, oh, honey. Sometimes, like, I'll sit on his lap. It's just like there's no interrupted reading time for him. You know, it's just like he's on display the whole book. So, but it's really gratifying to see your spouse weeping over a sad part in your book, you know. And he's actually come to a couple events, you know, when I go on book tour, and there was a book club in Brooklyn, and he came to that, and someone said, you know, what's it like for you to read your wife's book? And it was Life and Other Inconveniences, which came out last year and was just reissued in paperback. And he said, he actually got choked up answering the question. He said, that scene was very close to something that Kristan and I went through when our son was born. And yeah, it was really hard to read. And everyone was like, no. So I guess he's in my head too. I told him, oh, you're going to be a wreck after this book, but it's so gratifying too when you have like those readers who've been with you since the beginning and they write to you and they say this was the best book you've ever written. It's great, because and I don't know where you stand, Kitty, but I wrote romantic comedy at first, and there were family issues in there and some angst and tears, but the more I wrote, the more drawn I was to not the couple just getting together, but the development of the characters being much more important than, the physical attraction and then basing a relationship off the physical attraction. I wanted to give them big things to overcome, which is where I started to drift into women's fiction. And then my publisher said, let's just market it as women's fiction,
Oh, okay.
We think you belong there. And, some people will say, like, I miss your romantic comedies. I know during the pandemic, a lot of people have gone back to the lighter stuff, and I totally get it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want that, I like digging into the tough stuff.
Yeah.
Because we're all going to do it at some time or another.
Yeah. I mean, whatever it is, it's tough for you. Somebody else has gone through it, and it wouldn't hurt for somebody to be like, oh, wow, someone that I feel like this is like me, and make them feel that they're not alone, that they're not the only one.
Right.
We all know we're not the only one who's ever gone through it, but it didn't feel like it when we're going through it.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point. Again, thinking of takeaways for listeners, to grow and change and see how your writing changes over time is definitely like, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
It's like life, you want to grow and change and be smarter and braver. And in real life, a lot of people don't do that. So you can say like, oh, my brother, I wish he would just, and chances are he's never going to. But in a book, you can show the character doing that. And as an author, you can do that as well. You don't have to write the same book over and over. I don't think that you should. I know empires have been built on it, but and I, there's nothing like for me, like a light romantic comedy. I'm, big fan of Alexa Martin, Andy J. Christopher. They write like these incredibly fast, hilarious, delightful stories, and I'm hooked on them. Jackie Lau, but I've written those books, and I do want to keep evolving as a writer.
Yeah.
I don't know what my next book is about, but take it as it comes.
Yeah. And during the times that you're like, right now, this is what I write, like, that's a good thing to know too.
Yeah. The book that I just passed in is a real love story, and there's a very tight focus on the hero and heroine, which is different from my multi-generational books like Life and Other Inconvenience and Always the Last to Know, where we have, in Always the Last to Know, we have a 70-year-old heroine, a 42-year-old heroine, and a 32-year-old heroine. And they're all in the same family. That was what I wanted to write last year, and this love story was what I wanted to write this past year,
Yeah.
And as for the next book, I never know. Do you know? I never have a plan.
I have a feeling that the thing that ends up being the most important part of the book, that's the thing that I don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I have to say that I'm like, oh, like, best parts of the books are the ones where I'm crying as I'm typing and trying to wipe my eyes because I can't see. Yeah, because then you're like, oh, this is what this book is about. This is about Danny going, I'm an idiot. I can be an idiot for the rest of my life, or I can like stop being an idiot and be happy. And that happens like 20 pages before the end of the book. And I'm like, oh.
I always say, I don't know what my book is really about until about 200 pages in. It's because I know the situation and I know the characters and I know the challenges, but then there will be a line that just appears on my computer screen. And I think, there it is. That's what
Yeah.
this book is about. That's the theme of this book. Because I think that I have to spend time with my characters. I have to spend time with them on the page. I can't just think about them and outline and make notes. I have to write them into the story, and then I start to really understand them.
So do you think that you mentioned that first drafts are really, really hard for you. Do you feel like you throw away a lot of stuff?
I When I write a first draft, I'm miserable because, my books are 450 pages long, and it's daunting to write chapter one, and you think just 449 pages to go.
That's right.
And I am not a really confident writer. Although with 20 books now, I have learned that that's just part of my process that improves my book, is to not say, oh my God, I'm a star. I love me. Everything I write is amazing. Don't edit me. So I think, like, when I start to think like this is horrible, this is sappy, God, that's when I start to get better as a writer and question every choice. And so first drafts are miserable for me. I trick myself. This is a writer's tip. I write every scene in a separate document so that I don't have to go back to the beginning and toy with the opening line.
Yeah. Interesting. Because otherwise you would, you think, or
I would, I'd have like the first perfect 50 pages and then nothing after it, Yeah. So I write, the scene like, Josh meets Lauren's mother. And I put that in a separate document. And then when I'm all done, I stitch them together, quilt, and then I read my crappy first draft. I revise it. Almost every sentence is revised somehow. Wow. And then I pass it in. And then my editor gives me her revision letter, and I rewrite every sentence again. I take a strong look at every scene, and just, really finesse it, make the sentences lovely, make, the structure of the sentences different, that's when I really pay attention to it. And then I'm done. I'm really done. So nice. I guess 3 drafts, and one round of revisions is usually enough.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say that, when I'm doing the revisions, that's when I start hearing the music in my head. So I don't know if that is you too. Oh, good. I was like, this might sound stupid, but I'm going to say it.
That's when I start to say, like, I have something good here, and I love being edited. I mean, I like an editor with a strong point of view. Who said, like, I this thread is so beautiful. Can we bring it up more? Turn up the volume, or echo it throughout. And I think, love that, absolutely, we can do that. So I believe in that. I'm not someone who doesn't want any feedback, but I only want feedback from my editor. I don't have a critique group anymore. And honestly, I don't have the time for that. I'm not a fast writer. I write a book a year, which, out in the world is wow, that's really a lot. And in the world of like women's fiction, romance, it's not,
Yeah.
So I usually pass my book in, I work on it up until midnight of my deadline.
Yeah, it's hard to say I'm really, really done. And I've self-published all of my work mostly because I mash genres together too much. So there isn't really a spot for me. But I have to give myself a deadline, or I will never say no. It's because there's a part of my brain. It's the mean girl who went to an Ivy League college for a little while, who thinks she's smarter than the rest of my brain. She's like, it really could be better, dear. It really could be better.
I know. And that's the great thing about a deadline, is that, you can futz with it, forever.
Yeah.
And And it's tempting to do that. And also there's the feeling of like, I wrote another book. I had this whole book. I don't want to start over. I don't want to start
Yeah.
from a blank canvas. It's like, let me stay with this one just a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I'm writing a nonfiction book right now, and thank goodness I've had some other books in the past, because I'm typing going, this is not what I said I was going to write. What am I writing? And I'm like, nope, I'm not doing anything. So I use Scrivener. So similar
Oh
to
yeah.
you, every chapter is in a different document within the big document.
You can
But I'm
switch them
like,
all
nope.
around.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm like, nope, I'm not going to go back and read the other ones. I'm not going to edit. I'm just going to keep going, and I'm not going to do anything until I get to the end. And then I'll print it all out and see whether or not it really is a big, horrible mess, or if I didn't realize that I'm more brilliant than I realized.
Yeah, I love when I get my author copies, I read the book again. And by then it's been probably a year since I looked at the book, 10 months maybe. And I read it, in its form, and I come across sentences I don't remember writing, and I say like, this is really beautiful, or oh, I forgot that was funny. Yeah, I forgot that character. Um, and I'm glad that I let it go. And of course, the last book that you wrote is always the best book that you wrote, because
Yeah.
it's fresh. You're at the honeymoon phase. And, you think like, oh yeah, I love this book. But,
Yeah.
so people say like, what's your favorite of all your work? And I'm like, oh, it's this one, because it's like holding your newborn baby who hasn't,
Yeah.
hasn't like torn the wallpaper off and eaten all your chocolate chips.
Yeah. Yeah. Not yet. Yeah. And so I started becoming a runner when I was about 38 or 39. I wanted to do something crazy before I was
Hey.
40. Yeah. So I was in track for like a minute in high school, and the coach was like in his eyes, you could see that he was saying, you suck, you can't be on the team.
Oh,
But I've been running half marathons now for 10 years.
oh my
So
God.
who knew? But
Right.
I,
Right.
I I find so many parallels between, and I'm so loving, your running scene at the beginning of Fools Rush In. I'm like, totally been there and done
Right.
that.
Ripped from my own life. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. But there are so many parallels. Like the idea that like I am never going to finish first in any race unless maybe only one or two other people are in the race who've never run before. But otherwise, it's not going to happen. My goal, actually, my long-term goal, because you need long-term goals, is to be healthy enough to keep on running until I'm in the 90 to 100 age range,
Mm-hmm.
because then there's probably not going to be more than 2 or 3 other people in
Right.
there.
You
So I
can
should
definitely
get at
place.
least first, second, or third. Yeah, exactly. You know it. But then I think of all these things and how they apply to writing as well. Like you just can't try to compare yourself and compete with other people. You need to do your own personal best. And then
Right.
some races, I'm like, wow, that was like, I want to do faster every race. I should be able to in my mind. But then I'm like, well, okay, you fell, you hurt yourself, you got new shoes, and you did this.
Mm-hmm.
You're lucky you finished the race. And sometimes you have to look at that too as a writer. So while the
So
goal is to always make better books, yeah, that was my point.
I think the worst thing a writer can do is compare herself to a more successful writer in terms of um, who deserves it more. And it's a really easy trap to fall into of thinking, well, my book is better, and I don't understand why her book got all this attention. And like Anne Patchett and I both wrote our last book based around a splendid house, a beautiful house. Hers is called The Dutch House. Mine was called Life and Other Inconveniences. And the house is very much a character in the story. Anne Patchett is Anne Patchett. She's a literary writer who reviews for the New York Times, and I'm not. I'm a commercial fiction author, and I loved her book. It was narrated by Tom Hanks, which did not hurt a bit.
Yeah.
And and I'm thinking like, I will never breathe that air, but it's okay, because she's I mean, she's a fantastic writer. Her stuff is beautiful and it appeals to a different audience. And I mean, it was sad, beautiful book. And I know I'm never going to be Ann Patchett, you know, and that's
Yeah.
okay with me. That's all
Yeah.
right, you know. So I think that, you know, if you say like, well, she can write 3 books a year and I can only write one, or you have to remember that it's all up to the readers. You know, the readers make you a bestseller. They make you a viral sensation. They make you a success. And it's not always you, you know, sometimes it's the timing or the times, you know, luck of the draw. So I think nothing kills the joy of writing more than thinking you deserve a certain place in the universe.
Yeah. So in those hard times, so hard. I feel like I should edit the interview. It's way too long, but I'm not going to. If you're on a treadmill, stop. You need to just stop now. I'm sorry. But let's wrap up with that thought. What keeps you going when you're like, I'm just not feeling it today? You know, like I feel like, why am I not Ann Patchett? Or why am I not one of my best friends?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I I'm a pragmatic Yankee. I'm the hardworking middle child of my family, and I have to say, being a mother has really made me a better person. So I'm very aware of the example that I gave my kids and that I still give my kids. I have to show up to work, you know, and the book ain't going to write itself, right? And so I have to sit down and open a document and start typing words and somehow make those words into a story. So I know that half the job is just sitting down and opening your laptop, you know, and I'm lucky to have this job, and I know it, you know. So as hard as it can be, and as frustrating, and sometimes as empty as I feel of new ideas, I know it'll come. You just gotta go to work.
That's awesome. I love it. Great advice. Well, listen, tell us where people can find you and your books, and you have some new books.
Yes, Always the Last to Know comes out on June 9th, and it's a story of Barb, who is 70 years old, and her 2 grown daughters who have to coalesce around Barb's husband, John, their girl's dad, when he has a massive stroke, and really interact together as a team for the first time ever. And I think readers will really like it. It's women's fiction. It's got a romantic comedy line in it, and it hits bookstores June 9th. And you can find me at KristanHiggins.com, and my Facebook page is Kristan Higgins Books, and I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Kristan Higgins.
Awesome. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for giving us part of your writing day to talk about writing.
It was my pleasure. It was great. Thank you, Kitty.